In every city, on every empty street at dawn, there is someone walking home with a quiet defeat pressed against their chest. A dream they once held with fire, now reduced to ash. You have seen this look before. The hollow eyes, the silent calculation, the moment a person realizes the world did not bend for them, and they are not sure if they have the strength to push again. This is where most stories end. Not because the dream was impossible, but because something inside them collapsed long before the goal ever had a chance. And here is the part no one tells you. The moment of giving up never looks dramatic. It isn't a slam of a door or a burst of anger, it's subtle, slow. A quiet surrender disguised as logic, disguised as timing, disguised as maybe later. But beneath the surface, there is a reason, a hidden reason, one that almost no one ever identifies. And yet it dictates the fate of 90% of people who start something meaningful. You felt it too. That sharp pause before taking the next step. That strange hesitation you cannot explain. That voice that whispers you're not ready, not worthy, not capable. This video isn't about motivation. It's about exposing the psychological trap that makes most people quit right before their breakthrough. A trap so subtle it feels like your own thoughts, your own logic, your own truth. Stay with me. Because once you see what actually causes people to abandon the climb, you'll never unsee it. And the loop you just opened, the one pulling at your mind right now, gets answered in Chapter 4. Most people don't fail because the path is hard. They fail because the path is quiet. Success doesn't announce progress. It doesn't clap for your first steps. It doesn't congratulate you for surviving another week. It gives you nothing. No signs, no validation, no proof that the sacrifice is working. And humans are not built for silence. They need confirmation. They need to feel the ground moving. When nothing moves, they start to believe nothing ever will. This is the brutal truth. Your mind is wired to quit long before your potential is done growing. You are designed to seek immediate reward, immediate relief, immediate evidence. When you don't get it, your brain triggers the same emotional response as danger. It whispers that you should pull back, step away, stop risking energy on something invisible. And that's the trap. The invisible part. Every meaningful achievement grows underground first. Quiet roots, silent expansion, months where nothing looks different on the surface. But while the work feels stagnant, your doubts grow louder. They disguise themselves as logic, as maturity, as realism. That's why people quit right before they were about to see movement. The pain wasn't the work. The pain was the lack of proof. The emptiness between effort and result. That unbearable space where you're expected to keep going without seeing anything change. This chapter exists for one reason: to force you to confront the truth no one likes to admit. You haven't been struggling with discipline. You've been struggling with silence. And silence is what breaks 90% of people long before failure ever does. Alex and Jordan started in the same place. Same age, same job, same dream of breaking out of the quiet, predictable cycle everyone around them was drowning in. In January, they both promised themselves this year would be different. And for a while, it was. Alex woke up early, worked late, studied during lunch breaks. Jordan did the same. They pushed side by side, two silent warriors carrying the same fire. For the first 30 days, their progress looked identical. But by day 40, the difference began. Alex hit the wall, the invisible one, the one no one sees until they crash into it. He looked at his bank account. Nothing changed. He looked at his routine. Nothing felt easier. He looked at his future and saw the same blurry image as before. The silence around his effort convinced him he was standing still. Jordan hit the same wall, same silence, same doubt. But instead of concluding nothing was happening, Jordan assumed the opposite. He believed roots were growing where he couldn't see, that the silence wasn't a sign of failure but a sign of foundation. By March, Alex slowed down, then paused, then promised he'd start again when things stabilized. Jordan kept going with the same quiet intensity. No applause, no proof, no guarantee. Here's the twist most people miss. Jordan wasn't more talented. He wasn't smarter. He wasn't luckier. He simply interpreted the silence differently. Where Alex saw emptiness, Jordan saw preparation. Where Alex felt abandoned by progress, Jordan felt inches away from it. And that single difference is the beginning of the 90% dropout rate you came here to understand. Here it is. The truth most people never face long enough to escape. 90% of people give up because they hit something called the dead zone, a psychological choke point where effort rises, results stay invisible, and the brain interprets the silence as proof of failure. The dead zone is not a lack of progress. It is the stage where progress is happening underneath your awareness, quietly, structurally, preparing for visible growth later. But the mind hates what it cannot measure, so it panics, it searches for evidence, finds none, and declares the mission hopeless. This is the number you were waiting for. The dead zone lasts far longer than people expect. Not days, not weeks, sometimes months. A stretch of time where the external world gives you nothing but the internal world demands everything. And here's the part almost no one realizes. The closer you get to a breakthrough, the louder the dead zone becomes. The pressure increases. The doubt sharpens. The silence thickens. Most people quit right there, at the doorstep. Not because they were weak, but because they didn't understand what the silence meant. They thought the lack of visible movement was a verdict. A final answer. A sign that the dream had rejected them. But the dead zone is not the end. It is the threshold. The point where everything is about to shift, but nothing has shifted yet. And if you've ever wondered why success feels impossible, why every step seems heavier than the last, why giving up feels logical instead of emotional, it's because you were standing inside the dead zone without knowing its purpose. Now you do. And that knowledge alone changes the next move you make. Once you understand the dead zone, everything you thought was failure starts to look different. Every dull morning, every silent week, every stretch of effort that gave you nothing back, they stop being signs of inadequacy and start becoming indicators of construction. Because here's the psychological twist. Progress is always delayed. The mind wants it now. Reality delivers it later. Think of a bridge being built over deep water. For months, you see nothing but workers disappearing below the surface. No beams, no cables, no arch, just noise and absence. That's how success forms. The foundation is invisible by design. And while the structure strengthens beneath you, your doubts rise above you like a storm. Most people can't handle this imbalance. They misread the timeline. They assume the effort-to-reward ratio is supposed to be symmetrical. They expect visible results to appear at the same pace as visible effort. And when they don't, they collapse inward, convinced something is broken. But nothing is broken. This is how every meaningful transformation happens. Look back at your own life. Every time you improved, the internal shift came long before the external outcome. You changed your habits before your reality changed. You grew your discipline before your bank account grew. You became someone new long before anyone noticed. That gap, the growth between the person you are and the results you want, is where most people lose themselves. They cannot endure the delay. They cannot tolerate the tension. They cannot sit in the space between trying and witnessing. But here's the quiet truth. The dead zone isn't killing your progress. It's maturing it. It is the slow burn that turns potential into inevitability. The phase that separates those who are waiting for signs from those who become the sign. And the moment you reinterpret the silence, the climb shifts from unbearable to unavoidable. If the dead zone is what breaks 90% of people, then the antidote is not motivation, discipline, or grinding harder. The antidote is interpretation. The moment you change what the silence means, you change your ability to survive it. And survival is the real game, not talent, not timing, endurance. Here is the method almost no one uses, yet it separates the ones who make it from the ones who almost did. You shift your focus from outcome to identity. Not, did I make progress today? But, did I behave like the person who eventually will? The first question creates pressure. The second creates inevitability. Because outcomes are slow, identity is immediate. When you anchor yourself in identity, the silence stops being threatening. It stops being proof of failure. It becomes proof of alignment. Every day you show up, you strengthen the version of you that can handle the climb. And ironically, that version is the one success was waiting for all along. This is the game changer. Stop measuring days by results. Measure them by repetitions of becoming. The person who keeps going wins for one reason. They outlast the emotional collapse that takes everyone else out. They understand that the dead zone is not a test of skill. It is a test of self-concept. Jordan survived because he wasn't chasing validation. He was becoming someone who no longer needed it. That's the shift. The moment you detach progress from visibility, you become unstoppable. You stop negotiating, you stop second-guessing, you stop needing the world to clap before you take another step. When the 90% quit, they are responding to silence. When the 10% continue, they are responding to identity. And the difference between those two responses determines who crosses the threshold and who watches from a distance. There is a cost to quitting that people rarely calculate. Not the obvious one. Not the lost opportunity or the unfinished project. The deeper cost. The psychological debt that follows you long after you've walked away. Because quitting isn't a moment, it's an imprint. Once you place the idea in your mind that you retreat when things go silent, that pattern starts repeating in every area of your life. Look closely at anyone who gives up often. Their dreams shrink. Their confidence thins. Their decisions become safer, smaller, designed to avoid the discomfort of uncertainty. They build a life around minimizing pain instead of maximizing potential. And over time, the world stops feeling like a place of possibility and starts feeling like a cage with familiar walls. This is the quiet tragedy. Every time you quit in the dead zone, you train your mind to fear the climb. You teach it that silence is danger, effort is pointless, and patience is punishment. You reinforce the belief that breakthroughs belong to someone else, someone with better timing or better luck. But the truth is harsher. When 90% of people give up, they aren't escaping failure. They're stepping into a different kind of failure. A slower one. A quieter one. A version that looks like comfort, but feels like suffocation. They settle for a life that never stretches them, never confronts them, never asks more of them than the bare minimum. And years later, when the weight of unrealized potential starts pressing against their chest, they blame circumstances. They blame responsibilities. They blame timing. Anything but the real cause, the pattern they allowed to root itself in their identity. This chapter exists as a warning, not to frighten you, but to wake you. Because the life you're building is shaped less by the goals you set and more by the thresholds you refuse to cross. And the dead zone is the threshold most people never survive. There comes a moment in every journey when something subtle changes. Not in the world, but in you. It doesn't feel like motivation. It doesn't feel like inspiration. It feels like clarity. A cold, grounded recognition that the silence wasn't your enemy. It was the weight required to forge someone capable of carrying the success you asked for. This is the moment when the 10% separate themselves without saying a word. They stop asking, "Is this working?" They start asking, "Who am I becoming because of this?" And that shift alone rewrites the entire trajectory. Because once you understand that the dead zone is an identity crucible, not a punishment, you stop resisting it. You stop resenting it. You start using it. Every quiet morning becomes a sharpening stone. Every unrewarded effort becomes a test of alignment. Every doubt becomes a chance to step deeper into the version of you that can outlast anything. This is where power forms, not in the results, but in the refusal to collapse when nothing is happening. Jordan reached this stage without realizing it. He didn't feel stronger, he didn't feel closer, but his consistency was carving a foundation beneath him so strong that when the breakthrough finally appeared, it was stable enough to hold everything that came after. That is what most people never see. Breakthroughs require structure, and structure requires silence. If success arrived before you were ready, it would crush you. The dead zone is what prevents that collapse. Once this realization lands, you stop negotiating with yourself. You stop treating your goals like experiments. You stop expecting comfort. You move with a different posture. Calm, steady, detached from urgency, aligned with inevitability. The shift into power is not loud, it is quiet, it is internal. And once it begins, giving up is no longer an option that makes emotional sense. Picture this. Months from now, you wake up in the same room on the same morning, but something has changed. You're not the person who hesitates anymore. You're not waiting for signs or applause or certainty. The silence that once broke you now feels familiar, almost purposeful. You move through it with a stillness that wasn't there before. A quiet confidence built from surviving the part of the journey most people run from. This is the version of you the world never expected to meet. The version forged in the dark, not the light. And here's the truth you carry now. Success was never about talent. Never about timing. Never about luck. It was about staying long enough in the emptiness for the shape of your future to emerge. The 90% never see this moment because they quit before their identity had a chance to expand into it. You didn't. You learned to hold the tension, to endure the quiet, to build without witnesses. And because of that, you are standing at a threshold where something irreversible happens. You finally understand that the people who win are not extraordinary. They are simply the ones who refuse to collapse in the space between effort and evidence. So here is your final image. A door slightly open, light spilling through, a future pulling you forward, and you stepping through it with the calm certainty of someone who earned their transformation in the part of the journey no one saw. If this message reached you, if it echoed in the places you've been trying to ignore, then stay. There are more truths ahead, more thresholds, more breakthroughs hidden in silence. Subscribe, not for me, but for the version of you that refuses to go back to who you were before this moment.